But let's start today with Mississippi State, a team that we just kind of mentioned, right? Bottom of the pack when it comes to the SEC. What ends up happening there? What do we end up doing with them? What do they look like in 2025? Can they get any better? Cole, you're the SEC guy, so we'll let you start it off.
So last year they finished 2-10, and underneath first-year head coach Jeff Lebby, they lost every single game in conference play. They also lost to Toledo at home, which is an inexcusable loss for anybody in the SEC, let alone the bottom dwellers of the conference. The big problem was that they lost starting quarterback Blake Shapen 5 games into the year. They had to turn to Michael Van Buren, who a lot of people thought needed a full season to kind of build his relationship in this offense. The average margin of defeat in conference play was 17.7 points. The defense was dreadful. They never stood a chance in multiple games. The Tennessee game was a blowout. The Arkansas game was a blowout. Even though it felt like that there was a close call in the Egg Bowl, eventually you watch as Jackson Dart kind of put together his process, and they end up winning that game. They've added in some key players this offseason. I've liked what I've seen for the transfer portal edition. 24 new names coming on in for the 26 departed, including former Florida State quarterback Luke Kromenhoek, South Alabama running back Fluff Bothwell, Georgia wide receiver Anthony Evans, Brennan Thompson from Oklahoma, Colby Keenum from Kentucky, and Jalen Smith coming in from Tennessee. Now, the big problem is some of their key departures are signature key departures. You can't find a Kevin Coleman on the street most days who had over 900 receiving yards in an offense that was very hit and miss at times. You lose Mario Craver, the star wide receiver, the vertical threat. He's now at Texas A&M. Michael Van Buren is following the Dante Moore approach, sitting behind Garrett Nussmeier for a season, learning underneath Joe Sloan's offense to take over for LSU in 2026. So I think that they've lost a lot of pieces, but they've done a good job of kind of back-ending when it comes to building in the recruiting trail. 4-star linebacker Tyler Lockhart comes in. Tyshawn Willis, the edge player out of the state of Mississippi, comes on in. 4-star wide receiver Kamario Taylor comes on in. All top 100 players by 247 Sports. I think when you look at the expectations for Mississippi State this year, this is a team that just needs to double its win total. They still are in the rebuilding process. And in my philosophy, when I look at a brand new program, I give you 3 years at a Power 4 level. Year 1, build your foundation. Year 2, establish your culture. Year 3, strike while you're hot. They've done the bare minimum of setting a standard. What is supposed to be the expectations on offense next year? For an offense to work underneath Jeff Lebby, you have to have stability in the run game that opens up the vertical passing attack. They call it the veer and shoot offense. So vertical passing in the process of what you saw underneath Art Briles back in the day with Baylor. Then you have an emphasis on the ground game. I love the addition of what they bring in with Fluff Bothwell. I thought that he was a star running back for South Alabama last year, led the conference in the Sun Belt with 13 rushing touchdowns, 7.5 yards per carry, which was number 2 in the conference, over 900 rushing yards. You're going to have a quarterback battle going on, and probably, in my opinion, a better quarterback battle with Luke Kromenhoek coming on in from FSU to battle with Blake Shapen. I think the offensive line is going to have to be the big difference maker in this game. You got to be able to, I think, have stability when it comes to protecting whoever your quarterback is and to be able to open up your run game. Key matchups that I'm looking for next season, September 6th at home against Arizona State. That was a back and forth battle out in Tempe last year. What is it going to be like down in Starkville? September 27th versus Tennessee. That is the rematch of one of the closer games that we saw last year. It's their first SEC game. October 18th on the road. First game after a bye against Florida. November 1st against Arkansas. To me, that is the one conference game that I think I am most confident that Mississippi State can win. And then, of course, the Egg Bowl on November 29th against Ole Miss at home out in Wade Davis Stadium.
What do you think? So I watched, obviously, a lot of Luke this year at Florida State. I mean, do you have an early thought on whether or not, I mean, it's pre-spring, right? So yeah. I'm asking you to take a pretty big shot here. Do you think that he can beat out Shapen with the experience that he has?
I think that what you're doing is you're giving Blake Shapen a leash. You're saying, here's what we think that you can do. We got to see what we got in Kromenhoek because we're bringing him on in. We believe that he could be an upgrade over you for the long term. So throughout the spring practice, I believe you will see both Kromenhoek and Shapen get reps with the first team offense. Who looks more comfortable being able to deliver the strikes downfield? Who has more accuracy? Who is better underneath the pocket? You also got to look at what the offensive line is built like. Because if Kromenhoek is a pocket passing guy and he's not able to deliver the strikes because of the pass rush is stepping on up and they're getting in the backfield faster, if Shapen gives you a better shot to be able to maneuver outside, utilize his legs, we saw the mobility of Baylor at times during his tenure in Waco. If that adds more value, you got to throw in the best course of action. That doesn't mean that Kromenhoek isn't a guy that you don't believe in, But you got to look at your offensive line and say what works and what doesn't. If we have stability that where we can win with a 3-step drawback and a quarterback can deliver clean strikes down the field, I'm going to say you go with Cromenhoek because I don't know what the potential is, but I feel like it's a lot higher than Chapin. If Chapin right now feels like the best fit, he's going to start week 1. And until you start to figure out, hey, he's not the guy, let's turn to the other guy, it to me feels like that's where we're going to kind of turn our head to.
Yeah, looking at Mississippi State in this situation is kind of what I was talking about before, is just they're in a position where you're in the best possible place, but you've got to start performing at an SEC level that's going to be competent going forward. Now, I don't think that they're going to get bounced or anything like that anytime soon, and the SEC is very loyal to their teams. You do need those bottom feeders to beat up on. I do see that approach, but man, this is a program where it just feels like, hey, go there, get some NIL money if you want it, and then maybe try and jump to someplace bigger. It feels like a stepping stone program right now. And I don't know how much the SEC is going to want to retain teams like that going forward. They want brands. They want to be able to take up as much of the geography of the region as they can. And I think that's where the Big Ten has been able to jump out so much in the last few years in terms of conference expansion, is that while the SEC has taken over more of the map where they tend to dominate, Big Ten went to Los Angeles, went to the Pacific Northwest, and took up those TV markets. So if you're spending time on a market like Mississippi State and Starkville, it's like, okay, like what's the real value you're adding to this? And I understand your point about, okay, they're in a rebuilding process. It feels like they're always in a rebuilding process. So,
but they also were the first team ever ranked number 1 overall in the college football playoff rankings underneath Dan Mullen.
Sure.
Like, that's a trivia question that I'm going to know for the rest of my life.
That's great. And that was X amount of years ago. And that's cool that they have, some history to them, all those good things. And Dak Prescott was there once upon a time. Congratulations to Mississippi State and Fletcher Cox, former Philadelphia Eagle. Give him his respect. But no, I look at Mississippi State, and it's another one of those teams where I really do think there's going to be added emphasis on the bottom feeders of these leagues. And even looking within my own of like Purdue, Rutgers is particular, in that category often. Northwestern has struggled mightily for years and is spending oodles and oodles on their football program. Eventually, the dollars have to make sense. And Mississippi State is a program that's willing to invest. It's a question of like, when are you going to get to a point where you're actually competitive within this league?
Well, the problem is also you got to realize that losing Mike Leach in the departed fashion that we did, that ultimately kind of turned them into a different corner, because they still believed that they were going to have Leach for several more years before he retired. The heart attack and his sudden passing led to the hiring of Zach Arnett. Arnett promised people inside the building that things weren't going to change. Obviously lied, led to his firing after the loss to Texas A&M. They bring in Jeff Lebby. Lebby was a guy that was supposed to be, I think many thought, a coordinator in waiting. It was him and John Summerall who eventually got the job at Tulane. I think if you bring in Summerall, the defense is a lot better. I just look at some of the moves this offseason that really bother me when it comes to Mississippi State. The fact that you held on to Coleman Hutzler as your defense coordinator. When you're ranked dead last in every single category, or bottom 3 in every single category of the SEC, at a school that has been known for turning out, and you mentioned this, Tom, stellar defensive talent. You can bring up Fletcher Cox, but also bring up Jeffrey Simmons, also bring up Darius Slay, Jonathan Banks, Benardrick McKinney, countless others that have come through the program. There should be some stability on that side of the football, because even Dan Mullen, an offensive-minded coach, put an emphasis on defense being the backbone, and that has been known in the SEC. If you have a solid defense, you stand a shot on Saturdays. And right now, I don't feel like that they have that. The big question mark is, can this team improve enough with the stats? Like, I'm not looking at the record. If you go 4-8 in year 2, it's 4-8 in the SEC with a struggle conference. You can't lose to NIU. Like, you cannot lose to NIU and consider that to be a good pathway for a team that probably just 2 or 3 years ago was in the running for a top 15 finish of the AP poll. You can't believe that that's going to be the course of action. But I want to be able to say, this is an offense that went from 91st in scoring to 65th. A rushing attack that goes from 114th to 81st or 75th. A passing attack that goes from 113 to 57th. Scoring offense or third down opportunities from 119th to 55. Those are the numbers that we're looking at.
Big jumps. Those are big swings. It's possible, but I understand what you're saying. It's like incremental progress.
It's progress. And those are the type of progress that you want to see. Like, people, if you saw Mississippi State go to a bowl game this year, to me, that would define that the program is trending in the right direction.
Absolutely.
If you finish top 75 offensively and defensively in the SEC, and you're still a bottom dweller in the conference and 3-9, well, you're showing progress in that standpoint. But I can't be sitting here and saying you're allowing an Arkansas squad with no question, with questions all over the place at wide receiver to score 52 points against you. I
Yeah.
can't fathom a world where NIU is marching on into Starkville and they're putting up 30 points when they were just riddled by the transfer portal. Like, those are the things that I can't see from Mississippi State if you want me to buy in that Jeff Lebby is, number one, the right coach, and number two, a program that in a future Super League, it's worth holding on to.
How long of a leash? You mentioned Lebby specifically. How long of a leash does he have? Like, we talk about hot seat all the time, and I don't know that he's on anybody's like super hot seat or anything like that. But if they go 4-8 this year, is that enough progress to where he's not on the hot seat going into 26?
What do the numbers look like is I think the bigger question. And who are the losses to and what's the margin of defeat? Like, if you're playing close against Tennessee and against Ole Miss, yeah, maybe you're saying, well, we're not there yet, but give us one more recruiting cycle, one more transfer portal period. We're in a good spot. But also, you got to realize, is there a coach out there that wants to come to Starkville? Because the reason why they fired Joe Moorhead was because he didn't fit the culture, but they also kind of had a good inclination that Washington State wasn't going to retain Mike Leach. Leach wanted one more shot to go coach in the SEC. They swung big. They got their guy. If there's a coach that wants to come down there that is in a better standpoint than what a guy like Jeff Lebby is doing, I can see them make the fire because Joe Moorhead wasn't a terrible coach at the time. He just didn't fit the culture. So if you're trending upwards in certain formalities, I think that he is safe. If you lose to Northern Illinois, all bets are off. You cannot afford to lose to a G5 program in the SEC. It's inexcusable.
I was actually, that Mississippi State segment was a little better than I thought it would be. So I know we started from the bottom. That really wasn't bad. I hope the Mississippi State fans enjoy that.
Hey, thanks for watching The Power 2. If you like this type of content, make sure you hit subscribe and check out some of our other videos found here on the channel. Bye.